Hi guys, I'm just another guy named James, and today I'm going to be talking about the next handful of issues of G.I. Joe. And honestly, these are some good ones. I would say, arguably, the last truly good G.I. Joe story. So yeah, honestly, it's a really exciting set of issues. It's also probably a longer set of issues. So I'll get started in just a second, because I just remembered that these issues are written by Larry Hama, drawn by a variety of different artists, especially the first handful, all drawn by different people, from Marshall Rogers to other people whose names I forget, before finally the G.I. Joe comics settled on Ron Wagner as the regular artist. So you'll see the art gets a little more consistent towards the back half of this story. But yeah, honestly, it's a really good story. It's one of the last character-driven stories that isn't just a Snake Eyes story, which I like about it. It does have some weird interruption in the middle, which we'll see how much I talk about that. But yeah, honestly, let's just get started with our story, which begins with General Hawk briefing Stalker, Quick Kick, Snow Job, and Outback on their new assignment. A mission to rescue a reporter who was arrested in the Eastern European country of Borovia. While they're on the mission, the Joes will be discharged so that the U.S. government has a basis for denial. We then cut back to Denver, where Cobra Commander and his son Billy have been hanging out with a Crimson Guardsman named Fred. And we see that Billy has fully regained his memory. So he ditches Cobra Commander, Fred 7, and Raptor. But he gives his father a final promise that he won't betray him. He won't tell the Joes where he is. We then jump to Borovia, where we see that the Joes have met their contact and are devising a plan to break the reporter out of the military headquarters he's being held in. Back in Denver, we see that Billy has gone off to try to find the blind master who helped him regain his memory in the last set of stories. That last set of stories will be linked in the description down below if you want to check that out. And we also, but instead he runs across Jinx, a ninja who's part of the same clan as Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes. We also see that Cobra Commander has decided to turn over a new leaf and try to be a better father to Billy. But before he gets the chance, he is shot and killed by Fred 7, who steals his armor and decides to become the new Cobra Commander. In Borovia, we see the Joes infiltrate the headquarters and search for the prisoner, but they can't find him. So they find a guard and begin questioning him. And upon questioning, the guard reveals that the prisoner was sent back to the U.S. as part of a prisoner trade made by the State Department. At the same time, more guards have arrived and notice that things are displaced and the cell doors are open. So they sound the alarm and the Joes decide to blast their way out. As they get back to their truck, both Quick Kick and Snow Job take some fire. As the group runs from the Borovians, they come up to a roadblock that forces them to turn down a dead-end alley. So all the Joes get out of the truck, and their informant takes the truck and runs, making a suicide run to take down as many hostiles as possible. Stalker, being the commander of the Joe unit, orders Outback to run, to make it back to America and tell Hawk and the rest of the Joes what happened. We then see the truck get absolutely annihilated by a tank. The army comes rushing in, and Quick Kick, Stalker, and Snow Job are arrested. Back in the States, we see Hawk give the order to the rest of the Joes that there will be no rescue attempts. So Stalker and his unit are trapped. In Borovia, we see that Outback has retreated to the sewers, but he's still being chased by the Borovian security police. The Borovians can't find him, so they decide to fill the sewers with gasoline and light them on fire. Outback is able to escape by grabbing onto the bottom of a passing trolley, but with the Borovians unable to find his body, they decide to close the borders of the country. With Outback, we see that he has bought a truck from a farmer, and the Borovians figure out that all the Joes had sequential serial numbers on the ruples that they had. So the colonel takes to the markets to search for sequential bills. Meanwhile, Outback decides to pick up a hitchhiker to help cover his escape, but the hitchhiker tries to carjack him. But Outback is able to take him down. Back at the market, we see that the colonel has found the man who sold Outback the truck, so the group goes looking for him in the northern mountains. And they find the truck crashed in a ditch and the body of the hitchhiker, and a trail of blood that eventually they find him laying in the snow, but it's just a dummy made using the carcass of a chicken and Outback's clothes. Outback gets the drop on the Borovians and has everybody but the farmer get on the helicopter as he directs them using his compass. At a certain point, he decides he's gone far enough and jumps out of the chopper with a parachute, warning the Borovians not to follow him, but they don't listen and they're shot out of the sky by German artillery units. And Outback makes it home. We then see that Stalker, Quick Kick, and Snowjob have all been found guilty in Borovian court and are sentenced to labor in a gulag. In the desert, we see that Outback is dropped in the desert in the U.S. We see that Outback is dropped off to the rest of the Joes, most of who think he betrayed the rest of his unit and left them for dead. So tensions are a little bit high. In Borovia, we see that the Joes, as well as several other convicts, are on a train to the gulag, and the rest of the prisoners aren't nearly as friendly to the Joes as Stalker would like. So he establishes some pretty clear boundaries. Back in the States, we see Billy training with Jinx before he eventually begins questioning her about her connections to Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes. So she explains that she's Storm Shadow's cousin, and that they all trained together with the three ninja masters, the Hard Master, Soft Master, and Blind Master. Just on the other side of the alley, we see that Fred, Seven, and Raptor have just returned from burying Cobra Commander, and agree that they need to find and kill Billy to tie up the final loose end of somebody that knows that Cobra Commander is alive. Because he was supposed to be dead in the explosion of the pit that happened several issues ago. So yeah, Raptor then sees Billy and Jinx blast off in a Ford GT headed for San Francisco, and Raptor decides to follow them so he can kill Billy. In Borovia, we see Stalker taking charge of the prisoners and ensuring that they don't lose their humanity. We then see that Billy and Jinx absolutely dust Raptor, but he still follows them all the way to their destination, the Presidio of San Francisco, and more specifically the Defense Language Center. We then cut back to Borovia, where we see that the prisoners are being offloaded into the gulag. And some of the prisoners even say that the gulag will break even Stalker's iron will. Our next issue opens with Scarlet, Snake Eyes, Lady J, and Flint on a beach in Granada on vacation. But Snake Eyes is clearly very worried about Stalker. Back at the gulag, we see that Stalker has been assigned to the lumber detail, while the injured Joes make little gift shop souvenirs next to the gulag snitch. While Stalker is out harvesting the trees, he's taunted by one of the guards, an expert marksman, who said that if he ran, he would give Stalker a sporting chance. Back in San Francisco, we see that Billy has been taken to a Hidden Joe stronghold, where he tells Hawk basically the story of his life, and Hawk then asks Billy to tell Storm Shadow and Ripcord what happened to the Soft Master, Storm Shadow's uncle, and Candy, Ripcord's girlfriend, who were traveling with Billy when he got caught up in the explosion that lost him his leg and his eye. So yeah, back in Granada, we see that the Blind Master has come up to Snake Eyes and asks him for his help crossing a field of grass. So Scarlet goes with them, but before they get too far, Flint finds a sign warning that the field is rigged with mines. And just as he sees the sign, we see an explosion, one that presumably took out Snake Eyes and Scarlet. In Borovia, we see that the Joes begin to plan an escape until the gulag snitch rats on them, and Snowjob is taken away for a beating. Back in Denver, we see that Fred 7 has decided to take a nice trip out to Galveston, Texas, and once he arrives, he charters a boat so that he can get to Cobra Island, and he takes a mysteriously covered cargo with him. Flint then calls Hawk to report what happened to Snake Eyes and Scarlet, But Storm Shadow, who's standing right there, is having a hard time believing that a ninja would just walk onto a landmine. And after a little bit more explanation from Flint, he realizes that the Blind Master was with Scarlet and Snake Eyes. Back in the Gulf of Mexico, we see that Fred Seven's boat is being chased by a group of mambas. So Fred hops in the vehicle that he brought with him, the Pogo, and he takes off, leaving the fishing boat to become an oily smear in the Gulf. Fred is able to shoot down both mambas, and he touches down in front of Serpentor and claims that he is Cobra Commander. We then see that all of Cobra is demanding a fight between Serpentor and the new Cobra Commander. But when Baroness arrives, she is put on point to decide whether or not Fred is an imposter, because she's the only one who knows what Cobra Commander looks like without his helmet on. But before we see what happens over there, we cut to France, where we see that Snake Eyes and Scarlet and the Blind Master have arrived, and they have a brief run-in with some drug dealers that they just ruthlessly annihilate before they make their way to a train yard so that they can hitch a ride to Borovia. Back on Cobra Island, we see that Fred has taken off his helmet and revealed himself to the Baroness. And after some slight lies about what happened to the real Cobra Commander, Baroness agrees to run Cobra together with Fred as the new helmsman. Back in Europe, we see that Snake Eyes, Scarlet, and the Blind Master have joined up with a traveling circus that is en route to Borovia. In San Francisco, we see that Billy and Storm Shadow are training together until Jinx walks in and gives them an update, letting them know that Scarlet has been spotted with the traveling circus that is on its way to Borovia. More specifically, Fizink, a city right near the Gulag, where the Joes are being held. So, the three, Billy, Jinx, and Storm Shadow decide to join Scarlet, Snake Eyes, and the Blind Master in Borovia. In Borovia, we see that the commanding officers from the Gulag have come to an early performance of the circus, and one of the men decides to attack the dwarf that's part of the circus before he just leaves. Inside the now empty Big Top, we see that Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes have united their groups, and they do some ninja meditation in preparation for their mission. In the Gulag, we see that there has been a prisoner escape, and the expert marksman from earlier in the story goes after the escapee, leaving a lady named Olga to administer the discipline in the camp. We then cut back to the ninjas who take out the gate guards before moving on. Olga then enters the prison quarters and she starts shooting and beating people up for information before she takes away the snitch to have him beaten to death for lying to her. After the snitch is beaten, the ninjas come in and kill the guards before coming into the prison quarters and rescuing everyone. The marksman and his superior officer come back to find everybody dead and that all the prisoners are gone, and they call to have the border to the country closed. They know that the closest crossing is at the river, and the Joes are overlooking the border from a ledge, having no way to cross because the border is shut. Until the White Clown, the ringmaster of the circus, shows up with his human cannon and starts launching people into the river. But eventually the soldiers on the ground notice that the artillery fire they keep hearing is coming from a place where they don't have a cannon. So the sniper looks into the water and sees people swimming, but his superior tells him not to shoot so that they can avoid another international incident like the one that happened when he shot the White Clown's wife. So the sniper moves his line of sight up to the mountain where he sees that Stalker has basically challenged him to a duel that Stalker wins before he is shot across the river. Back in the US, we see the Joes returning from Borovia touchdown, and they get welcomed home by the whole team. Stalker immediately goes to find Outback, who apologizes for not staying to fight with the rest of his team, but Stalker says not to worry about it, that he was obeying a direct order, and that knowing Outback got out was the only thing that gave them hope while they were trapped in the Gulag. Scarlet and Snake Eyes are returned to active duty, but Flint is chewing them out for leaving him and Lady J in the dark until Lady J punches him in the face and tells him that Scarlet and Snake Eyes did what they did so that Flint and Lady J could have plausible deniability. But Flint and Lady J kiss, make up, and that's where the story ends. And honestly, this is a really good G.I. Joe story. I'm not going to lie to you. does have kind of the hints of a lot of story things that would become problems that the G.I. Joe comic would have later, like having Snake Eyes be the saving the day in every single story. But it's also not just Snake Eyes. Stalker gets to have his one-on-one duel with the guard who's been taunting him the whole story and stuff like that. It's not just a literal direct Snake Eyes saved the day. Without Snake Eyes, the story would have ended completely differently, which is nice. And honestly, it's a really good story. That issue with Outback, where he's getting out of Borovia, that's an all-time favorite, and that's actually from the G.I. Joe secondary comic, G.I. Joe Special Missions, which is a really odd choice to me, but it's a great issue, so I don't mind. But yeah, it's just a really good story. I like that it doesn't just introduce a whole new wave of Joes that you don't care about, that you'll hardly ever see again. And I like that it's all about the characters. It's about Stalker, Quick Kick, Snow Job, and Outback, all established characters, going on this mission, having it go wrong, and being saved by Snake Eyes, Scarlet, Storm Shadow, Billy. The Blind Master and Jinx are kind of new characters, but they're all established. It doesn't feel like they're forcing in all these new characters in places where they don't really belong, which I really like about it. The killing off of Cobra Commander is it feels like such a side note to this story, and having Fred 7 come in, having Fred, a Crimson Guardsman, come in and replace Cobra Commander is, I think, a really interesting idea, and one that I like a lot. Having Baroness and this new Cobra Commander working together to kind of run Cobra from the shadows is a really interesting thought. And something that I do like about this story, in addition to all the stuff I already said, a long time where Cobra isn't the bad guy, isn't like where it's not just the Joes versus the Cobras again and again and again, or the Joes versus the Dreadnoks. The Dreadnoks count as Cobras at this point because they're always with Cobra. But yeah, honestly, I really like it for that, because that's something that you saw a lot in the first era of G.I. Joe, those first 10 issues. You saw that a lot, where you would get like G.I. Joe versus the October Guard and stuff like that. It wasn't just Cobra all the time. And I like that creative energy that just exudes from this story. And honestly, I do like Ron Wagner's artwork throughout the back half of the story. And I really like Marshall Rogers' art in the first issue of the story, which is interesting. The first issue is something of a famous issue because it was redrawn by Marshall Rogers. It was originally supposed to be a Todd McFarlane drawn issue, and you can see a lot of the concept art if you look for it online. You can see the McFarlane pages and compare them to the Rogers pages. Personally, I think the Rogers pages are a lot better. I think Marvel made just the correct choice. It just looks better and feels better having that Marshall Rogers artwork in there, and I really like how it looks. Yeah, this is just a really good set of G.I. Joe issues. Like I said, it's maybe one of the last great G.I. Joe stories, but it still has some of those things that would become big problems with the comic later, creeping in around the edges. And I think it handles those. It doesn't have those problems, but you can see where it's going to have those problems later, if what I'm saying makes sense. But yeah, really, that's all I've got for you folks today. So I'll see you next time, and I'm just another guy named James. Goodbye.